Welcome back to the Daily Pulse. David Martinez here. Thanks so much for listening in this morning. Had a busy morning, huh? Lots of things going on here this morning. And joining us on the phone right now, we have author Sandra Champlain, author of We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Sandra, thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning, David. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much for coming on. The title of the book is really catching to me. We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Talk about the beginning. How did this start?
Well, first of all, talk about a skeptic's discovery of life after death.
Yeah.
Never in a million years would I think I'd be somebody to write a book on this. Because flashback 10, 15 years ago, people that talked about life after death, people that went to mediums, psychics, I thought they were all nuts. Okay? And I was very vocal about that. You know, I remember going to bookstores and I'd see books on spirituality and things, and I thought, oh, these people should get a life. You know, there's much more to life. You know, come on. And then suddenly I woke up one day with this huge fear of dying. And I don't know where it came from. I mean, certainly my grandfather had passed when I was a kid and I'd lost pets. But it was just this overwhelming fear of kind of who am I? What's my life for?
So what was that like, though? What was that feeling like when did you wake up concerned about driving in the car? I mean, how did that really come about?
It's funny. I don't know how it came about. It was just there. And, I had dreams about getting hit in car accidents.
Oh, okay,
and
sure.
Yeah, and it was just like a fear of the unknown.
Okay.
That's the best way I can say it. And It was very uncomfortable. And I tried to keep myself busy doing other things, and it would just like creep back in.
Now, did you think your time was up? Was this a sign from someone? You think at that point were you thinking that, or how did that work inside your head?
I didn't think my time was up, but it had me just start questioning. I'm Catholic, went to church every Sunday with my family, and I started looking through religion, my own, and then others. You know, what proof is there that I have nothing to worry about, just to calm my own fears?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you went from having the fear of dying, and then where did you go after that?
Well, it's interesting because I had to get an answer. Sure. And the more I researched, the more I couldn't find an answer. And I thought, well, if I can just be the best person I can be, I have nothing to worry about after I die.
But then I got to experience seeing world-famous medium Doreen Virtue do a live stage show. David, she was so specific about people's loved ones. I knew there had to be something more to this.
And it had me actually fly to California to personally study with that medium.
Really?
Yeah. And it was, David, it was one of these things where I had to know one way or another. And I didn't tell anybody in my life what I was doing. I just said, weekend trip to California. This was back in 2005, spent $2,500 that I don't have, charged my credit card, because that fear was so big that it's like, well, maybe I can prove it for myself that this is real or that it's not, and rest my mind one way or the other. And if I can tell you what happened in that weekend, in the first maybe 5 minutes, is what really opened the door for me that life after death is real and our loved ones are around.
Well,
can I share?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So Doreen Virtue is her name, the name of the medium, and she's world famous. And she said, if you're brought out here, it's for a reason, one of those type things.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah, sure. Well, there were about 20 of us in the class, and most of the people were dressed, I would say, like gypsies. So there I was in my khakis and my polo shirt, not belonging. And she said, everybody's scared and worried. We're going to just do a practice round first. We're not going to really do a medium reading, just want to show you how it's done. So everybody grab a partner. So I grabbed this middle-aged woman, saying, "You be my partner." And she said, "Hold hands, close your eyes." And she said, imagine you're connecting heart to heart. And she says, now this is just trial run, not really doing it. Use your imagination and create a person standing behind that person. And she says, I want you to tell a story, who they are, maybe what they died of. There's usually a profound message that comes through. But again, make it up. So I thought, well, I'll go first because I've got quite an imagination. And so behind my partner, I invented this man. All of a sudden the name Jan came to mind. I saw a fishing boat. So, well, he's a fisherman. And now I'm telling her the story the whole time.
Right.
I said, I'm thinking it's your grandfather on your mom's side. And where that came from, I don't know. Big gap between his front teeth, sandy blonde hair, really windburned skin, died of lung cancer. And he wants you to tell your mother this. And then there was this profound message. So I opened my eyes and I thought, okay, next, your turn. And the woman's crying. Her grandfather was named Jan from Denmark. I don't know if I mentioned that, but
Yes.
I said the country Denmark. He had a gap between his teeth. He died of lung cancer. He was a fisherman. And that message that I gave was something the mother had been waiting to hear the man say while he was alive.
Wow.
Oh.
That freaked you out?
Goosebumps. It freaked me out, freaked her out. And then she turned to me and did the exact same thing, talking about my grandfather, his German Shepherd, walked with a cane. And so that opened the door that whether I want to believe this or not, there is something to this.
Yeah, I mean, as a skeptic coming from where you were, I mean, that had to really, I don't know, scare you, maybe would be an appropriate phrase to use?
Yeah, it was scary because having this information, it's like, well, I've got to do something with it.
So
but I didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
that was 2005. It's 2013, and the book was just published.
Well,
so clearly something happened.
Sandra,
and I think
you
it was my own fear of
but
not wanting to look stupid, not wanting to be one of these crazy people.
Well, but you were a skeptic too. You were coming from
Yeah,
the skeptical end. You needed to learn more. You weren't ready yet.
I wasn't, and I had to learn for myself, well, what else is there? And so there's, oh my gosh, people hear about near-death experiences, and
Sure.
they think, oh, yeah, can't be real. Well, there's one doctor that I studied with that actually studied blind people who had near-death experiences, and they've never been able to see. And when they had their near-death experience, they could tell names, faces, colors, things that they didn't even know. There's a whole world of life after death studies through science, even through a little bit with U.S. government, doctors. And so I wanted to collect all of this for myself because I thought, someday the day will come that I need to share this with people. And just what comes out of my own mind isn't enough.
You talk about grief in the book. How do people deal with grief now? And how do you think the book would help?
Well, the thing is the grief is actually the catalyst that had me write the book because, someday was out there that I'd write a book and I'd help people and do the noble thing. But, who am I to write a book? Other people write a book. Who's going to buy my book? All that internal conversation we have.
Yeah.
Would it be good enough? How would even somebody start? But my dad died in 2010, and the grief that I experienced personally, not just Dad dying and the severe pain that I really never knew could be so bad, but started having huge fights with my siblings. We were always a close-knit family. And, David, you hear about those families that break up when a parent dies or people that get divorced when a child dies.
Sure.
And,
yes.
oh, gosh, the arguments were so nasty that I thought, what would turn a normal family into such monsters?
Yeah.
My memory was awful. Just awful. And I know you and your listeners have probably lost someone and can relate with this. And so what I found out is in our brain, well, first of all, I had to find out why, because I love my siblings, and not only did I lose them when my dad died, but they have children. And to be outcast as kind of the greedy sister, that's the one I got labeled as.
Oh, yeah, there's always one, right?
Always one.
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
Yeah.
It just didn't work. So I found out when we grieve, and grieving is not just caused from death of a loved one, because you think, we'll grieve when a parent dies or a cat or pet dies.
Sure.
But when people have any major change in their life, whether it is a divorce, whether they lose their job, these poor people who've lost their homes in Oklahoma, somebody's diagnosed with an illness, all those kind of things put you in this state of shock and this state of grief. And what happens in our brain is we have this neurotransmitter called serotonin. And people have heard about that. It
Sure.
makes us feel good, and it's our when we laugh and things, and serotonin controls our mood. And when we grieve, our brain produces maybe 10% of what it normally does. And so that accounts for the anger, the sadness, and that sort of thing because we're not producing enough serotonin. And also, it controls our memory and our perception. And so what I found doing my research is people that are grieving cannot store the information that they're getting correctly and remember it. So one case in point, I had a conversation with my sister, and she was going to talk to my other siblings about Dad's care. She says, Sandra, so you're saying this, this, and this. And I said, no, I'm saying this, this, and this. Well, I kept asking her to repeat my words because I knew she was going to tell my siblings about it. And finally, on the fifth try, she finally said, okay, this is what you're saying. Yes. And I'm thinking, why is she having such difficulties remembering 3 simple points? Well, she went off and told my siblings, her original story.
Right.
And I was so ticked off. And I'm thinking, she's out to get me, And so bottom line is those kind of arguments and miscommunications led to, I never want to talk to you again kind of thing coming from them. And now that I've done the grief research, it's like, oh my gosh, a grieving brain can't communicate properly, can't remember
can't process,
things.
And it can't process either, right?
Can't process.
Right.
Not to mention, all the physical, terrible feelings of sadness and all that. So I decided to take my research that I found and I had to tell people about it. So I created a free audio called How to Survive Grief, and I posted it online. Just me sitting at home in a voice recorder, uploaded it. Yeah. And within a year, 3,000 people in 15 countries had listened to it.
Amazing.
It just started spreading virally. Doctors started recommending it. Suicide prevention agencies started recommending it.
Great.
And the final straw that had me say, this needs to go into a book is I started receiving emails that people chose not to commit suicide because they realized the deep, dark, depressing place that they were feeling. And I explained it perfectly. They're like, wow, this is grief caused by a loss.
Sandra, we're running up against the clock. Where can people find your book?
People can find my book, bookstores, Amazon, and if they go to WeDon'tDieBook.com, they can also get a free copy of my How to Survive Grief audio.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. And it's doing well, right? You said when we were talking before we came on, what was it, on Amazon.com?
It hit number 1 on Amazon.com for the grief category, and in overall motivation books, it hit number 4, just behind Tony Robbins, Dr. Phil, and there was my book.
Wow, those are some big-time names, young lady.
I know. Just sitting here, a girl in Massachusetts.
Congratulations. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll have to talk again when you can come on a little bit longer.
I'd love that, David. Thank you so much.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. That's Sandra Champlain. The book is We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, and we're going to be back in 2 minutes.